When we moved into this house about a year ago, we didn't really have a lot of furniture. And so we bought this £20 sofa off of Facebook Marketplace, but it's kind of boring in terms of color and it's also not very comfortable. So I came up with the idea to fix this by making a footstool from scratch. The idea was to make the sofa more comfortable to sit on, but also to introduce some more color into the house. The thing is, making a footstool from scratch requires a lot of upholstery, and that's a skill I currently do not have. I have reupholstered one seat of a chair before, but I think this was quite easy compared to what I'm about to try. But to be honest, this is kind of part of the fun, not knowing how to do something. And the upside is that you get to design a thing completely how you want it to look. So let's give it a go. We kind of had to think about what the requirements were for this room. I think we have 3 requirements. It needs to make sitting on the sofa more comfortable. The second requirement is that we often have mugs of tea or maybe even a bowl of food. So we want that to also be able to fit on this footstool. And then the third requirement is that it needs to make the room more colorful. We both want to have more color in the house, but it can often be quite daunting to just make a decision and go for something bold. By looking at existing reupholsters, are they called reupholsters? People who reupholster? By looking at people who reupholster and seeing their process, I think the first step is to start with a wooden base. My partner and I got gifted these 2 IKEA wooden benches, but we only really use one of them in the house. So I decided to use the second one for the base. So the design was going to be a simple rectangle. And I needed some plywood, which I found in a workshop that I go to where people end up donating wood. So all of this base so far was free. I didn't have to buy any new wood to make this base, which was really nice. At first I thought it was going to just take me maybe a day, maybe 2 evenings to make this plywood base, but it ended up taking me about 4 evenings. And this is a point that I want to make in this video because I'm on the journey of learning to make things, doing woodworking and other skills. And one thing I consistently run into is that I underestimate how much time something will take. And the reason for this is when I think out what to do when I make this wooden rectangle, it's quite easy. It's like making sure I have the dimensions of the wood, so cutting down the wood, putting it together with screws and reinforcing it somehow. And that sounds simple enough. But then I get to the workshop and I realize that the drill somehow is not powerful enough to drive the screw through the wood without me pre-drilling it. So then I get a small 0.5 centimeter drill bit, and those are really, really easy to break. So I break about 3 of them. But then again, this is the fun of learning woodworking. It's only through doing these things where you realize you don't know what you don't know that you learn and become better at what you do. All right, it's time to finish the footstool. And it took us a while to decide the color, but we have decided. Choosing the fabric was probably the most exciting part of this project, but also the most anxiety-inducing. My partner and I really wanted to use this as an opportunity to put more color in this room, but it's quite daunting to go for like a super out there or bright color. So we ordered a few samples first, which we knew would work in this room because they would complement the existing colors in the room. However, when those samples arrived, we both kind of felt like it was kind of boring. It wasn't really a color where we both went, yes, this is it. We also ran into a second issue, and that is that we have quite a patterned rug in this room. This means that if we do end up going for a patterned fabric, they clash really quickly. And I looked at some existing design photos in which people actually use 2 different patterns to make them clash intentionally. But I think in our case, we couldn't really find a pattern that looked kind of cool together. So 3 sample rounds later, we finally found a color that we really liked. Pink. It'll have a bit of a reddish piping, red-orange piping, but I'll start first with gluing the foam to the base and putting on some of this material, which is like a cotton cover, which will make this hopefully feel a bit less square and a bit more soft. I then also got my stapler, my hand stapler out, and loaded it up with the staples. So next up was cutting the fabric to size and learning how to use an industrial sewing machine.
Left hand spool for sewing, the right hand one for loading bobbins. Okay, from that tensioning down to this one, through here, up through this little spring, and then through the needle from the left.
As part of the design, I wanted to use a single line of piping all around the footstool. So we will need some piping for this ottoman, and I'm at this beautiful machine right now where I'm going to attempt to do a test run with this piping cordage and some spare fabric. So the idea here is to have this cord inside some fabric like that, and hopefully this foot, which has a profile for the piping to sit in like that, hopefully this will just sew a beautiful little piping with fabric on it. Let's see how this does. Let's do a little test. Oh no, I think I've lost the bobbin. Not bad. This definitely could be worse, but needs to be a bit tighter, I think. So this is the problem, I can just pull it out like that. Let me show you something cool about this machine, because when I was taught how to use this, I was really baffled by how smoothly this runs, because I've had entry-level sewing machines before, but this is really beautiful. And the reason is, look at that oil. Beautiful new oil with these wicks that pull up some of this oil into this machine so that it runs smoothly. Beautiful. Oh my god, this machine makes me so excited. I was told this machine is 60 years old. It was used by a woman who uses it to make curtains. So she used this professionally, probably hours every day for about 60 years. It never had a service and it still works. The thought of a machine like that in 2026 is unheard of. So I really, really love when I get to work with machines or other objects that stood the test of time. Okay, we tried it again and this looks much better. Nice and tight as well. I read that if you cut fabric diagonally for piping, it is easier to use when you wrap it around something. So I did that. And this machine is a dream. It literally goes at the speed of light. So you have to be careful not to pierce your finger, but the piping was done in minutes. For the next step, in essence, it really just came down to stretching the fabric over the foam and stapling it in place. But I think the thing that I found quite difficult is to know how taut to pull the fabric, because the foam is quite rectangular. I did not want the end result to look like just a rectangular box. I wanted the corners to be kind of smoothed out. I think this is really where the skill of reupholstery comes in, knowing how fabric reacts and then try and do the same on all sides. So I started by just stapling it in the middle on one side, going over to the other side, pulling it, and then stapling it there too. Now these two staples are just to keep the fabric in place, and the rest of them I would actually pull the fabric taut a bit more and then start pulling the staples all around. And this was actually going all right, except for the fact that I really had to get used to the hand stapler. You need quite a lot of force to push down on the lever, and because I was trying to hold up the frame, I was trying to pull the fabric over the frame and staple it in place. It was a bit of a faff, but in the end I got a few first staples in, and that allowed me to just go all the way around. The next step, which was kind of the easiest step, was to put the piping over the stapling edge. So I just put the piping at equal distances from the top and stapled it in place. Okay, so we're almost done. In order to finish the bottom pink skirt of this ottoman, I think reupholsterers use something called back tacking strip, which is basically a really thick, either plastic or carton strip that you can use to staple the fabric onto. And when you fold the fabric back over, it creates a really sharp line. Now, back tacking strip is quite expensive and it will take a long time to get here. So I assumed that I could use card paper instead, because it's quite thick. It looks kind of like back tacking strip in terms of thickness. I'm not really sure, but I'm just gonna try and use this and see how that goes. Alright, so the next step is to use these homemade back tacking strips. Strip of fabric. The idea is that this fabric will be placed like this. The back tacking strip up against where I would staple it. And then once it is stapled, I can fold it over, and this strip helps me create a super straight line. It's hard. So hard to get it down. Woohoo! That is very pretty. That looks clean. All right, well, let's keep going. This is fun. I just had a realization now that I'm almost finished with this project that there's different types of staples that came with this. And one of them is this, and it's kind of a T-shaped nail. And these are called brad nails. I'd never heard of brad nails before. So I left these to the last part of the project, not knowing how good they would be. And so I've been hammering in these other nails that are kind of U-shaped, and really feeling very guilty for my neighbors having to hear me hammer all day. And now I've loaded up the brad nails because I ran out of all the other ones. And this is the best solution. I should have used this from the beginning, really. At this point, I was really getting excited because I think, looking at the footstool, it looked much better than I thought it would look. There's two things left to do. One of them is to insert these M8 nuts so that they can actually accept these legs. This wasn't really going to work, so I bought a threaded nut instead, hoping that would solve the issue, but unfortunately I couldn't get those to bite into the wood. Up to this day, I don't know how to use them. If you have some tips, please let me know. Okay, last thing to do is to sew up the bottom part of the corner, and I'm going to use a stitch called an invisible stitch to do that. And just like that, I had my first real reupholstery project, a finished footstool. Now, it's been about a week since I finished it, and even though I still haven't solved the leg connection issue, it works well. It definitely brings color to the room. It makes sitting on the sofa more comfortable, and there's room for a cup of tea. Thank you for watching.